Right now, somewhere in your kitchen, there is probably a jar of ginger, a strip of painkillers, or a bottle of cough syrup. You reach for it without thinking. But the real answer to where that instinct came from is far stranger than a pharmacy shelf. It starts 60,000 years ago, in a cave, with a dying man surrounded by flowers. You are about to see how your ancestors turned pain into knowledge, and knowledge into survival. Picture the world before medicine had a name. No hospitals, no labels, no warnings printed on a box. Just a body in pain, and a world full of plants that could either save that body or kill it. How do you think the first human figured out which was which? Your ancestors did not have textbooks. They had something older. They had attention. They watched. They tasted. They buried their dead, and sometimes they buried them with flowers. In 1960, an archaeologist named Ralph Solecki was excavating Shanidar Cave in northern Iraq. He found a Neanderthal skeleton, nearly 60,000 years old, resting in soil packed with pollen. Not random pollen. Clusters of it, from yarrow, cornflower, and hollyhock. Plants still used today for their anti-inflammatory and antiseptic properties. Solecki called it the flower burial. Some researchers later debated whether the pollen came from burrowing rodents instead of ritual. But even in that debate, one fact never moved. Neanderthals were surrounded by medicinal plants, and they knew exactly which ones grew nearby. Knowing a plant exists is one thing. Knowing what it does to your body is another. So how did that gap get closed? Slowly. Painfully. One mistake at a time. Imagine a child hunched over with stomach pain, chewing on a bitter root because an elder once did the same thing and stopped crying. That is not medicine as we picture it. That is pattern recognition, passed down like a story. Eat this leaf, the fever breaks. Chew this bark, the pain fades. Rub this paste on a wound, and it does not turn green and swell. Somebody in your bloodline noticed that, and somebody died learning what did not work. This is where the science gets specific. In 2012, a paleoanthropologist named Karen Hardy studied the dental calculus of Neanderthal, remains found at El Cedron in Spain. Dental calculus is hardened plaque, and inside it, microscopic food particles survive for tens of thousands of years. Hardy's team found traces of chamomile and yarrow embedded in Neanderthal teeth. Both plants have almost no nutritional value. They taste bitter. There is only one reason to eat something bitter, with no calories, that happens to reduce inflammation and fight bacteria. Your ancestors were self-medicating. Does that surprise you? It gets stranger. Humans were not the only ones doing this. In the 1980s, a primatologist named Michael Huffman watched a sick chimpanzee in Tanzania walk past dozens of edible plants to seek out one specific shrub called Vernonia amygdalina, a plant local healers already use to treat parasites and stomach illness. The chimpanzee chewed the bitter pith, ate almost nothing else, and recovered within a day. Huffman's research helped birth an entire field called zoopharmacognosy, the study of animals self-medicating with plants. If a sick primate can identify a specific cure among hundreds of plant options, imagine what a species with language, memory, and shared storytelling could accomplish over 100,000 years. This is the part most people miss. Herbal medicine was not one genius discovery. It was millions of small trials, repeated across generations, refined by grief and survival. Think about that for a second, and if this kind of hidden history keeps your attention like it's keeping mine, hit subscribe now, because this channel exists to keep uncovering stories like this one. Now picture the Alps, 5,000 years ago. A man is dying from an arrow wound, high in the mountains. His body will not be found again until 1991, when hikers stumble across him frozen in ice. Scientists call him Ötzi. Inside his leather pouch, researchers found something unexpected. Birch polypore, a fungus known today to have antibacterial and antiparasitic properties. Ötzi's intestines, when tested, revealed he was infected with whipworm. He was not carrying that fungus by accident. He was treating himself with a targeted remedy 5,000 years before germ theory existed. How does a man with no microscope know to treat a parasite he cannot see? He does not need to see it. He only needs to notice the pattern. Eat this, feel better. That knowledge does not require understanding why it works. It only requires repetition and someone willing to remember. This is how oral tradition became the first medical record in human history. No ink, no paper, just memory, chanted, sung, or whispered from a healer to an apprentice, generation after generation. Every tribe developed its own pharmacy, built entirely from observation. Willow bark, chewed for pain, centuries before anyone isolated the compound inside it that we now call aspirin. Garlic, rubbed into wounds, long before anyone understood bacteria. Aloe, used to cool burns, passed down as instinct before it was ever explained as science. And here is the twist most documentaries leave out. Not every plant that got used was actually helping. For every willow bark that eased a fever, there was a poisonous look-alike that killed the person testing it. Early humans were not running controlled experiments. They were gambling with their own bodies, and the survivors passed on the lesson while the failures simply disappeared from the story. That silence is part of the history, too. Medicine was built on top of a graveyard of trial and error. Does that change how you see a bottle of aspirin sitting in your bathroom cabinet? By the time agriculture emerged, roughly 10,000 years ago, herbal knowledge had already become specialized. Certain individuals in a community were recognized as healers, the earliest doctors holding mental libraries of hundreds of plants and their uses. Archaeologists have found dedicated medicine bundles in burial sites across multiple continents, small pouches filled with specific dried herbs kept separate from food stores. That separation matters. It shows early humans were not just eating whatever was available. They understood the difference between nourishment and treatment. If you have ever taken a painkiller before a headache turned unbearable, you already carry a piece of that same instinct. This knowledge did not stay isolated either. As tribes moved, traded, and met one another, herbal knowledge spread like a second language. A remedy discovered in one valley could travel hundreds of miles through storytelling and trade, tested again by a new population, refined further, and passed on again. Some of that ancient plant knowledge eventually reached written form in Sumerian clay tablets around 3000 BCE listing plant remedies, and later in Egyptian papyri describing hundreds of specific treatments. But the writing was never the beginning. It was simply the moment an already ancient oral tradition finally got copied down. So when you think about where modern medicine actually started, it was not in a lab. It was in a cave with a dying elder, and someone brave enough to try the bitter leaf first. That single act, repeated 1,000,000 times across 100,000 years by people who left no names behind, built the foundation for every medicine you will ever take. The instinct did not disappear either. It is still inside you, every time you reach for ginger tea when your stomach turns, or peppermint when your head aches, without ever needing a doctor to explain why it works. If this story changed the way you look at the plants around you, say so in the comments, because a like and a comment tells this channel to keep digging up stories this old and this true. Right now, somewhere in your kitchen, there is probably a jar of ginger, a strip of painkillers, or a bottle of cough syrup. You reach for it without thinking. But now you know the real answer is not far away at all. It is written into you, passed down from a cave, a wound, and a bitter leaf someone chose to trust.